Hi, welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, the CMO Insights series. I am your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today we have as our guest, Kirby Wadsworth, who is Chief Marketing Officer for Illusive Networks. Kirby, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So you have worked at some pretty cool companies over the last few years. I think I first met you when you were at F5.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of change in marketing, a lot of change in technology. From your perspective, what do you think has been one of the bigger changes?
Well, I think we have a lot better sense for the individual now. Even back in the F5 days, we were looking at segments of markets as, thousands, tens of thousands, large groups of people that we could sort of identify having similar similarities, right? Now we're looking at individuals or groups of 2 or 5 or 1. And we know a lot more about individual behavior, and we can track individual behaviors, so we can treat individuals more selectively with, I like to use the word respect, with more respect for the individual. I think that's been the biggest difference. It's partly technology, it's partly attitude, and it's partly a better understanding of marketing's role in the end-to-end sales motion, of engagement all the way through close.
It has been a lot of changes indeed. So how do you, institutionalize that within your marketing programs and scaling it?
Sure. So, again, it's as you said, I've been through a lot of different and interesting sort of iterations of companies, from very large global companies to very small companies, as we're in today with Illusive, which is an emerging technology startup company, so a security company. I think one of the things that we've been able to do is personalize, back to that word, and institutionalize technology. So where once we had marketing teams who were experts doing a lot of the technology or interfacing a lot with the technology, now we have the BDRs interfacing with full technology stacks. I don't know if you saw the Bridge Group's most recent SDR compensation study, but one of the things that was interesting about that is that they said for many years, for 8 years or so, it's been pretty consistent that BDRs have a stack of 4 technology products. It almost doesn't matter what the technology is, but they have 4 products that or 4 technologies that they use. But 10 years ago, that was sort of unheard of. I mean, we didn't have auto dialers even, or we barely had auto dialers 10 years ago. And we certainly didn't have the ability to push down that level of knowledge and understanding to the BDR so that the initial interaction with the customer could be that as finely tuned as it is now. I started as a BDR when I was 16 years old, selling meetings for land in Houston, Texas, to people in Boston, Massachusetts. Pretty tough BDR gig. And we used to have strips of pink reverse telephone books that they would give us. We literally just go down the telephone and call the pizza parlor owner or whoever it happened to be. And it's funny now, I talk to the BDRs when we hire them and sort of walk them through the process of what we do today. And it always strikes me as amazing how much we've been able to flip that whole model on its head. When we call somebody and we start to engage a conversation with a prospect or a potential prospect, we have an amazing amount of information at our disposal before we even start that conversation. If the BDRs and the marketing people are doing their research right, so it's amazing how that's changed.
It's an interesting perspective. Actually, I hadn't stopped to think about the SDR role specifically. But you're right. I mean, whether they're using a chat product or auto dialer, or they're using, let's say, Navigator from LinkedIn, they might be having different ways where they're getting information. Of course, I had the more traditional teenage job. I was a lifeguard and a waiter.
Similar.
Yeah, I think that totally prepared me actually for what I'm doing. Although, actually, I will say my first job, I worked in a Greek diner, and they measured everything. I mean, they literally made us take the ketchup bottles and turn them upside down at the end of the night because they wouldn't want to waste a penny. And I think those are some of those early days, operationally minded, of counting everything and measuring everything, were really important. So that probably stuck with me a little bit.
Well, that's what we're doing now. I mean, that's how. I mean, honestly, we're squeezing every ounce out of that ketchup bottle, of every bit of data that we can get. So
okay, so we can write a new blog. Why marketing is like a ketchup bottle. Right? But if you don't like ketchup, we can go with mustard or mayonnaise. So curious, you're now because you've worked at some really big companies, as you mentioned. Now you're at a smaller company and starting up. How is your strategy shifting, and what are you tending to focus on?
Yeah. Well, and again, it comes down to scale. It's interesting. The process doesn't change that much. It's just the matter of the pure scale that you're operating at. We still, or maybe it's a holdover and a pullback from what we've learned and what I've learned and what my team has learned in some of the larger companies that we worked in. But when you apply that to a smaller company, it's really just shrinking the same process. I mean, we still are data geeks. We're still really trying to understand and operationalize process. I will say it's actually easier and quicker to do in a smaller company. I'll give you a specific example. When I first came to Illusive, it was early days in terms of marketing platforms and processes and that sort of thing. And again, in an early stage company, it's really, for the first stage is find anybody who's willing to talk to you and sell them, anything. I mean, you got to get, some revenue flowing. But then as you start to build up a little bit more of a install base, you can start to bring in the same processes. And so what we've tried to do here and what I've tried to drive here is really the same kind of a model, right? Documenting stages of the engagement process. And to me, it really is just one continuous flow. I think most people think of it that way now. We may engage somebody initially through content that they download or through an offer of some sort to, give them information or invite them to something or whatever. But it's the same process that we would have in a very large company, just scaled down to a smaller group. As I said, in many instances, it's easier because we're in control of all of the internal stakeholders and all of the, all the touch points in the company. It's a relatively small number, right? So you can sort of be a little bit more dictatorish about how you want this to look like. In a large company, it takes a lot more socialization to make it happen. At F5, it took us at least 2 years from beginning sort of end to optimize the whole process. And this was, back 2012 or 13 or something like that when we were going through that process. Nowadays, it took us, I was really surprised, it took us less than 120 days to get to a place where we had end-to-end visibility from the first conversation all the way through the end. We could actually start to do first touch attribution, which is not perfect, but at least it gets you started on the attribution and sorting process. Again, not a lot different, just smaller, faster, more focused, but all the same elements are there.
What about people? Is your approach or prioritization of who you hire different, being in a smaller company than a large?
Yeah, it is. So at this stage, you don't really have the ability to hire a marketing operations specialist, or a marketing operations director, which is a great. For me, it's a critical component of a more large scale operation. When we were at Limelight, F5, the companies that are doing 50 to 100 billion, up to $1 billion, you can afford that kind of stuff. Here, everybody's wearing multiple hats. So, it's a phenomenal sort of success story for us. We hired a relatively inexperienced person to come in and trained him. We use HubSpot, trained him on HubSpot, trained her on HubSpot. And it was amazing to watch. In the course of really 90 days worth of work, she's become a HubSpot expert. And we do have the luxury of a sales operations person, because you really need somebody, when you start to build a sales team to manage Salesforce and all of the vagaries of sales operations. But the two of them have bonded in a way that's really kind of great to watch. And it's been so fun to have somebody come in who, that's another thing, I guess, I should have said when we were talking about what's changed. the tech has become much more accessible, right? It's not dumbed down. It's just easier to use and more logical, and it makes more sense. And that's kind of exciting. But the rest of it, you still need general marketing people who understand how to build campaigns and how to, do personas and figure out segmentation and targeting and messaging. You need product marketing people who can translate the product message into customer benefits. So the only difference really is that we're all wearing different hats. I find myself here at 10 o'clock at night, sometimes being the HubSpot administrator and going in and, cleaning up broken workflows, and scratch my head and wonder how I got here. But it's fun, it's kind of neat when you're that close to the data and that close to the day-to-day operational functions of the systems.
It's one of the things I've noticed, and you can tell me how you feel about it, is kind of the reemergence of brand. For the longest time, right, there's this emphasis on marketing, drive operations, drive financial results, drive systems, and brand's not as important, but get operational. But then now as the focus returns to the customer experience and customer focus, realizing the brand promise through all the different touch points seems to be more important than ever. But what's your take on that?
Well, it's especially important. And again, my specialty now is smaller companies, and it's really almost job number one I always say there's three things that we have to do in this size company, and one is to establish that promise and in the mind of the market. And the market is broad. The market is investors, the market is customers, the market is, influencers and press and analysts, and then now especially bloggers. Hey, Jeff Pedowitz is very influential, right? We have to get to this broad space in the market and position the company in the market. And I don't know if you've ever seen what the security market landscape maps look like, but I don't think that there's a .000 font, but if there is, that's how small every player is on these massive maps of what the marketplace looks like. There's thousands of security vendors. So you've got to position yourself properly in there, and everybody wants to try to position you, of course, in a place you don't want to be or something. So it's a critical element, and that really does come down to brand. It comes down to image, really, a lot. Boy, I question for a moment changing the brand of the company, and customers and partners came out of the woodwork. They loved the little cat thing that we use. Okay. Oops, sorry. Only kidding. Only don't touch the cat. Only kidding. But they, it does really matter. And a lot of that comes down to word of mouth. We want to position the company in a place where we're viewed as trustworthy, and we're viewed as being, very solid in committed in doing what we say we're going to do. This is the security market after all, right? So it's all really about that. It's about getting brand out there that people can align with, and that becomes an emotional thing, right? I know you know this, but a few years ago, Jason Teeple and I wrote a book about how to build emotional connections to people through digital outreach when you didn't have the ability to actually touch them, and all the elements that went into that. But branding really comes down to building that emotional bond, which is interesting. As I said about this cat, people are really emotionally attached to the cat in ways that I never even began to anticipate, but should have. I should have realized how important that was.
Well, and I think this is where a lot of marketing executives have missed the mark, and the push to scale, right? Get their content campaigns out to more channels. They're missing the authenticity. They're missing the opportunity to connect. They're focused on the volume. They're focused on the level of activity, but they're not actually focused on the true interaction with why their customers should care about them in the first place. And look, it's easier said than done, right? And we all know customer-focused marketing, customer-focused anything is hard. But the companies that do it well are doing phenomenally well. And then you have a lot of companies that are lagging behind. So as you look back on your career and you reflect, what are some of the greatest lessons you've learned, and how would you advise a younger version of you?
I had some great mentors growing up and going through this. And one of the recurring lines that many of them kept telling me is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Take it easy. stop, breaking glass everywhere, worry more about the relationships and the people that are involved in the process than just the pure process itself. And I never listened or paid any attention to them. And I wish that now that I had. Now, it's not entirely true that I never did. And I think I put out some social media about this a couple years ago, where somebody or two or three people had come back and said, you made this very significant impact on my career, and thank you, kind of thing. And I was reflecting on how important that was, and how much now, it matters to me that people who I hired out of business school are now CMOs at gazillion billion-dollar companies, and it is fantastic. It makes me feel great. But that's the one thing I think that I wish I had been able to tell the younger Kirby, and have with a sledgehammer to the head. Slow down a little bit. Be concerned about the people and the process and the technology, but equally so. Don't force everything so much because you can see the end and you just want to get to the end, and you get a little annoyed at trying to explain to everybody why we're doing what we're doing. It's just do it. That model. I regret some of the times that I did that, and I wish that I hadn't.
Sage advice, absolutely. So finish this sentence. A year from now, my team at Illusive Networks will.
Let's see. Be fat, dumb, rich, and sitting on a beach in Barbados. Is that fair? No. Yeah, I like that too. Except for the fat part. I already got that. But no, I think really what we're trying to do is build a very cohesive team that works together very, very well and really likes and enjoys working together. We have a real focus on what we call one team. It's actually one of the three pillars of the company that we're building the company around, is the team aspect of this, and the importance of collaboration, the importance of listening and learning from each other. So I would really sort of finish the sentence by saying my team will, my growing team will enjoy the work that they're doing and grow with it, and will report back that this is one of the best jobs that they've ever had, and it really had a significant impact on their career going forward.
Love it. That's fantastic. And I love how you tied it back to just your story about the people that you mentored and where they are today. Kirby, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah. Go Cowboys.
Yes, sir. All right.
All my friends in Boston just went, what?
Come on, we got to root for somebody besides the Patriots. I mean.
Not if I ever want to go home again. Anyway, it's nice talking to you. Thanks. Appreciate it.